Well, you're going to hear a lot, of course, about the big issues that voters say are helping to drive their votes in the election campaign and at the ballot box on October 21st. But there's a lot of numbers behind what Canadians are thinking, and numbers matter in a campaign. The parties poll, individual firms poll, and so we're going to try and make some sense over all these these polling numbers over the course of the campaign. To do that, we're going to be joined regularly by David Coletto, the CEO of Abacus Data, who's a polling firm, of course, doing polling of his own, but he's also going to be here on a regular basis to help us understand not just his results, but results from other polling firms as well. What are we driving for here?
Well, I think the main goal is make sense of a lot of the noise that's going to be out there. Lots of polls are going to be released between now and Election Day. And so our own data plus all the other pollsters, I would come and try to tell you obviously what the horse race is, who's ahead, who's behind. But maybe even more important, I think, is what impact is the campaign having on voters' perceptions of the parties, their impressions of the leaders, and are they reacting to different events as the campaign happens? That's really going to be what I hope to bring today.
All right, and we're looking forward to it. And we're going to dig into some information now. We're going to focus our conversation in just a few moments here on the issue of immigration. We're going to hear a lot about that. Could end up being a very divisive issue in this campaign, depending on how the politicians handle it. And they might handle it depending on what they know Canadians are thinking, right? And that's always the case for some of these issues. So we're going to get down to the immigration issue in just a moment, but we want to put that in the context of what key issues are for Canadians as we head into this campaign. So let's run through the list of what you've found is really the sort of top issues that will help drive the vote in this campaign.
Yeah, and we regularly ask voters in the surveys that we do what issues matter to them. In this case, we asked what are the top 5 issues that are going to be the most important in deciding your vote. And so if we go down this list, the cost of living is the top issue. More people, 55%, picked it than any other issue, followed by healthcare at 42%. Climate change and the environment scales up high in this election, higher than I think we've ever seen. Taxes at fourth at 38%. And then if you look at the other issues, the economy, poverty and inequality, housing, well, we'll talk about immigration and refugee policies makes the top list. Government spending and deficits, and then cost and availability of medicine. So these are what I call tier 1 issues. We asked people, we had a much longer list, and these were the ones in which at least 1 out of 4 Canadians put a check mark.
All right, so let's drill down now on some of the findings on issues around immigration. And we're going to hear a lot about it in the campaign, as I said. We're going to hear parties say we need more immigration. We're going to hear parties say we need less immigration. There's going to be a big conversation around what immigration does for the country or what it might do to detract from the country. So let's start there. You went in, you wanted to find out, okay, what do people feel about immigration? Is it good for Canada, bad for Canada? What did you find?
And frankly, we simplified it. It's a much more complex issue than we made it out to be. But we asked people, which of these 2 statements comes closest to your view, that immigrants today strengthen our country because of their hard work and talents, and they make our society more diverse and interesting? Or do you take the view that immigrants are more likely to be a burden on our country, that they take jobs, housing, healthcare, and they are too different from the people who live here now? And what we find is the majority of Canadians fall in the immigration is generally good, 61%. But I think people are often surprised when I share these results that 39% have the other view, that perhaps immigration is a burden. And we always sometimes feel Canada is the exception to the rule that we're seeing around the world, where if you look at Europe and sort of the influx of refugees and immigrants has sort of created some populist
tolerance
rise.
is being strained in some of those countries.
In the United States, in the same story, Canada's not immune to this, right? The same forces are at work. But what's interesting is when we look at it by party.
Let's do that.
And you mentioned at the start, this is a divisive issue, and it is. It's one of the most politicized issues. Conservative supporters, you can see here, are the most likely of the 4 main parties. If you put the People's Party in the mix, they're the most likely to think that immigrants are a burden. But Conservatives are basically split. Half the Conservative voter base thinks immigration is generally a good thing. Half are concerned about the burden that it has on the country. That's less so among the other parties. Particularly among the Liberal Party, it's pretty close to a consensus that immigration is a good thing. The reason this issue is so divisive, though, is because it's more salient among certain voters. And I think the dilemma that the Conservatives and Andrew Scheer face is that, on the one hand, their voters are much more likely to even rank immigration as a top issue than Liberals or New Democrats. And you can see how mixed their views are. And so, he wants to make sure he's responsive to his voters and gets them motivated, especially when you've got Max Bernier talking about this issue and talking about it quite prominently. But on the other hand, he needs to still grow the base, and a lot of his own supporters think immigration is a good thing, for whether it's economic or ethical or moral reasons is beside the point. They think it is.
Okay, let's go to this next board where you put it in the context of views on immigration by economic evaluations. What does this mean, and what do we see?
Well, what we did here is it shows there's a relationship. So the way to read this is those who describe the Canadian economy as poor, which in our survey was about 30% of Canadians, you can see that almost 2/3 think that immigration is a burden. So if you are feeling less optimistic or positive about the economy, you are also more likely to think that we shouldn't allow more immigrants in, or that they're a burden.
Yeah, you've connected those two things. The
There's a relationship. It's not necessarily causal,
right?
But you may be seeing a relationship between, well, if I can't find a job, or our hospitals are filled, or I can't find good housing because the economy is not going well, I blame someone.
Right.
And often immigrants are, and it has been through history, sort of that source of blame. But the flip side is true. If you are more optimistic about the economy, if you're feeling good about where things are going, you are more likely to think immigration is a good thing. And as many economists say, we need actually more immigrants for economic growth, and so you probably aligns closer with that. So there is a relationship between how you view the economy and your views on immigration.
And then you dug down on the issue of which party has the best approach to immigration. What do we see there?
Yeah, and again, this is among people who care about this issue. So that 25%, the Conservatives have a clear lead. 37% of those who care about it think the Conservatives have the best approach. The Liberals are in second at 15%, and the NDP at 8%. A smaller number than some of the other issues we've looked at say unsure. Interestingly, 11% of Canadians say none of the above, which to me is a signal why perhaps Max Bernier is making this an issue. That there's perhaps there's a small minority
some
of Canadians,
kind of an audience there for
who says, well, all the mainstream parties have the same view on this. There's a consensus about immigration, because Andrew Scheer's been fairly clear. He supports immigration, and so that leaves an opening perhaps for someone else. And I think Max Bernier's rushing in to try to fill it. He'll see whether he can connect with those voters. But it is an issue right now that is much more animating the right side of the political spectrum than the left. We'll see if it becomes a real prominent issue in this campaign.
All right, David Coletto, once again, thanks.
Thanks, Peter.